All right, time to get into the dailies. But first, let me introduce my panelists this morning, and we'll be interrogating matters of press freedom. In the crosshairs is our topic, freedom and responsibilities of the press. Already in studio, we have Winnie Kamau. Sami, I know you are here first, but allow me, ladies first. Winnie Kamau, President, Association of Freelance Journalists and Editor, Talk Africa. We also have, as I mentioned, Sami Muraya. I think you were here before me, Project Manager, Journalist for Human Rights. And we're expecting Eric Odwor, Secretary General, Kenya Union of Journalists, and Victor Bwire, Director, Media Training and Development at the Media Council of Kenya. Sami, rain or shine, you're a journalist at heart. I'm
a journalist at heart, bright, up and early. We don't care about the weather or what happens out there. We have to work at the end of the day.
All right, welcome to studio. So, front page of the Daily Nation, reason at last. And they explain that a collective sigh of relief swept through Kenya last evening after today's protests were called off following the softening of hardline stances by President William Ruto and Azimio leader Raila Odinga, giving Kenyans the peace they craved in this holy season of Ramadan and Easter. President Ruto was first to extend an olive branch by ceding to one of Azimio's demands on the reconstitution of the future Electoral Commission, a move Odinga welcomed and agreed to call off the protests. And I see they've quoted here President William Ruto as stating, "I have carefully listened to the issues raised by Honorable Raila Odinga in times like these. It is not about who is right or who is wrong. Like Winston Churchill said, I dare say that courage is what it takes to stand up and speak, but it is also what it takes to sit down and listen." And on the other end, Azimio Chief Raila Odinga is quoted as stating, "We stand down our demonstrations for Monday, but in doing so, we want to emphasize that we reserve the right to call for demonstrations should this process bear no fruit, should there be no meaningful engagement or response from Honorable Ruto to our counter offer. We'll resolve to resume our demonstrations after 1 week." And I see here the bottom half of the Daily Nation front page. Christians mark Palm Sunday as Holy Week starts, and it's a picture of Catholics holding a procession in Mombasa. And we also have a book serialization that began yesterday. The drama at Bomas ahead of poll results. Ex-REBC chairman, the man pictured in here, and that is Isaac Hassan, reveals the dirty games politicians played in the run-up to the announcement of the presidential election results in 2013. I also see on the front page of the Daily Nation, fresh squeeze as banks raise cost of loans. Borrowers face tougher times ahead amid a move by banks to raise the cost of loans, which will hit those currently servicing loans and those planning to take them. More on that on the back page of the Daily Nation. I see at a glance 9.5%, the new central bank rate that the banking regulator set for lenders, and 8.75% what the central bank rate used to be before the latest review. So it's gone up from 8.75%, gone to 9.5%. This is the fourth time that the Central Bank of Kenya has raised the central bank rate within a year, and that is as detailed by the Daily Nation. This means reduced incomes, they continue to say, for individuals and less profits for businesses at a time high cost of living has left many struggling. This particular report is by Peter Mboro, back page of the Daily Nation. I also see on the back to the front page of the Daily Nation, I also see up here, new STI strains. Scientists find 2 strains of sexually transmitted diseases. This is on page 8, more on page 8 of the Daily Nation. I see here alarm as new STI strains discovered. This report is by Leon Lidigu, and new strains showed mutations associated with drug resistance. And there's a quote, they quote Dr. George Njoroge as stating that for mutations, nobody knows whether the regular antibiotics we have will work. That will need clinical trials. He is the founder of the Naivasha-based Center of Africa's Life Sciences. Okay, so more on that on page 8 of the Daily Nation. Front page of the Taifa Leo reads Walegeza Msimamo, and I see here, just like as we saw on the front page of the Daily Nation, an image on one side of Raila Odinga, on the other of William Ruto. And tunampa, and this is Raila Odinga being quoted, tunampa Ruto wiki moja kutekeleza masharti ambayo tumekuwa tukipigania. And then on the other side, William Ruto is quoted as saying, tumekubali kuunda kamati ya bunge ishughulikie swala la kuwateua makamishna wa IEBC. And up here it reads, Ruto na Raila wakubaliana kufanya mazungumzo huku Azimio ikitoa masharti makali. And I see they also have highlighted the new STI strains on their front page because it reads, aina mpya ya kisonono ya tua Kenya, maradhi mapya yenye dalili zinazofanana na ugonjwa wa zinaa yaripotiwa nchini. And then an image also again of the Palm Sunday there and this one is from where? This one is from Lamu on the bottom page of the Taifa Leo. And I see they've also highlighted that riba ya mikopo kuumiza, benki zapandisha riba ya mikopo, hali itakayowaumiza zaidi mahasla. More on that on they tell us ukurasa wa pili of the Taifa Leo. And at the very top here, on the right hand corner, marafiki wamenitoroka, mbunge wa zamani wa Kisumu ya Kati Fred Ouda alia kutupwa baada ya kushindwa uchaguzini. All right, front page of the Standard reads as such, intrigues that led to big climb down. After weeks of hardened positions, President William Ruto offers olive branch by proposing a bipartisan approach through Parliament to resolve the issues. Azimio leader Raila Odinga calls of protests amid conditions. And again, an image here of Christians marking Palm Sunday yesterday. I see here also they've highlighted court told how Maribe Joey drew murder plan. That is on pages 10 and 11. And again, Isaac Hassan, who we also saw on the front page of the Daily Nation. Isaac, how politicians held IEBC captive. Former IEBC chairman in new book says politicians have always tried to influence the appointment of commissioners and other decisions that put intense pressure on staff. So that's the front page of the Standard, front page of the Star now. And same thing, Ruto backs down after meeting with Raila. Emissaries, head of state, agrees to talks on the reconstitution of IEBCs. And they create the impression that it was Raila who reached out first. So Ruto backs down after meeting with Raila emissaries. And but we'll get the details once we read the report on exactly what happened. And there's more on what page 6. I see here president rules out shutdown of media and internet during Azimio demos. And again, an image of Palm Sunday. This must be Lamu. Yes, Mary Mother of Jesus Catholic Parish. And the father there is on top of is riding a donkey, which brings to mind the biblical story. All right, so I'll invite my panelists to weigh in. And before I get into the press freedom aspect of things that has been highlighted on the Standard, front page of the Standard, as well as the Star, I'm curious what you make of the headlines today, the phrasing. Sami?
Well, just looking at the tone, to be quite honest, a lot of us were expecting a holiday today. It's been several Mondays where most people have not been going to work. But just seeing that united front by the two political leaders, President William Ruto as well as opposition leader Raila Odinga, and the tone that has been used by the media, it has been one that has just shown the expectancy, not just from us as the media, but also as a whole country. Because if you look at what most religious leaders were talking about yesterday, it was peace. Everyone was looking forward to a peaceful week, a period when we don't have protests that are ongoing. So for me, very welcome and a brilliant tone, to be honest.
Okay. What about you, Winnie?
I think this is a welcome move, just to see that the two political leaders are willing to sit down and talk. That is what we all want. And I believe in the continent, Africa is looking at us. Kenya has always been the beacon of hope. And if we were to go any other way apart from dialogue, then it means what is there for Africans. So this is a welcome move, and the tone is really good for us. Although, like Sammy said, we were waiting. I was so scared. I was thinking, oh my God, if I come up from Thika Road, I might find all the the cops there. But it's just great. Yeah, looks like things are working now.
All right. Yeah. I agree 100% with the headline, the Daily Nation headline, reason at last.
Yes.
But if I could only purchase two papers today, it would be, to be honest, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this, it would be the Standard and the Star, because they hint at the behind-the-scenes intrigues, because actually the Standard uses the term intrigues that led to big climb down. And I'm not saying that is not contained in the Daily Nation. I'm just saying from the surface, reading on the surface. And then the Star, Ruto backs down after meeting with Raila emissaries, like I want to know who reached out to who first.
Yes.
And all that. But speaking of the Star headline, there is this one here. Media freedom. President rules out shutdown of media and internet during Azimio demos. This one is, this report is by Peter Obuya and George Owiti. I'm curious what you made of the president's statements on press freedom yesterday, particularly considering that just an hour or two prior to his statement, the Kenya Media Sector Working Group issued a statement of their own saying if you... speaking of reports of shutdown, media shutdown, as well as internet shutdown, what did you make of the president's statement, Sami?
Well, first of all, let me once again laud the two principals, because at the end of the day, not many of us were expecting them to really back down yesterday. So just seeing them being able to read the mood and seeing what was happening in the country was a big thing. But then there's also a very big statement from the Kenya Media Sector Working Group, because this came as a reaction of that press conference that was happening in Manzoni by industry leaders. And generally just sitting back and asking ourselves, as a democracy, as a country that has come so far, and even just part of what the president himself said, we have made so many gains to go back to the days of shutting down the internet. But then we also have to specifically pick a term that he kept on using, or something that he said more than 3 times, and that was the biasness of the media, because he kept on reminding us, you might be biased against us, but at the end of the day, we will not shut you down. The whole shutdown issue also comes from a letter that came out from the Communications Authority, and that was more than a week ago, basically talking about live coverage by broadcast media. And again, the media sector was up in arms, literally saying that that was wrong, because the last time we saw a similar shutdown was back in 2018 when 4 TV stations were shut down, and it was not a very good move at the end of the day, because we have to exist with each other. That is the politicians as well as the media. We need each other. We need the politicians for our stories. The politicians need us for us to be able to give them coverage, and most of them have actually gotten to those positions of power because of the coverage that they have previously received from the media. So let them not forget that the media does not only work when it works for you. Sometimes we will also call you out, because part of our job is accountability, and we also have to hold you to account. And it goes to the spirit of the president yesterday, where he said he wants a strong opposition, and the reason being, at the end of the day, he wants an opposition that can hold his government accountable. So that is why they also need a media that is accountable.
Okay. Yes. When he repeatedly said, despite saying that they will not shut down the media, and we have come from those dark days, he did say that if you were in my shoes, you would. And I think it was 3 times he repeated the phrase unfair and biased.
Yes.
What did you make of his statement?
I felt like the president has a double speak of sorts, because he has been, like even the clips that have been replayed previously, that he was supporting the media. But now he thinks that we are biased. And I remember But
which clips previously? Because they did write during the campaigns as Kenya Kwanza to complain that Citizen TV, Royal Media Services, and Daily Nation huku hii nyumba yetu have not been according them the same
kind of coverage.
Yes.
Yes, but you see, one thing that we have to distinguish is the media owners having a stand in a political setting. And then there's the journalism. Journalism, the tenets of journalism is objectivity and fairness. So yes, we might have erred and we might not have come out clear to say that, yes, our media owners have this stand, but us as journalists, this is our stand. So maybe that is the thing that has always been back in their minds, but we would like to help the president and the presidency at large, that they should know that journalism is about fairness and objectivity. And it's maybe with this new wave, maybe we can now start again, and we can start rebuilding that trust amongst us.
So it's a question of trust. And I'm
Yes.
working on pulling up the statement, and here it is, by the Kenya Media Sector Working Group. Hi, Victor. Hi. You can take your seat. Go ahead, go ahead. And this was issued yesterday at the Manzoni Lodge in Machakos County. And should I read it? It's rather lengthy, but several issues were addressed in this statement, including the events of Thursday. Now, on Thursday, and now that Victor is here, I can invite him to speak. So before I get into this and the details contained herein, what did you make of the president's statement yesterday?
Obviously, thanks and sorry for coming here. I didn't know 6 is very late at night. So I mean, well, to me it was expected because, like we're joking elsewhere, this thing did not just happen in a day. I mean, the conversations, discussions have been going on behind the scenes, and this was expected. But obviously, limiting myself to the issue of media, I think the issue of media has been raised many times. And sometimes it was wrong for the police what they did. Obviously, attacks against journalists are not some things that we would expect at this time of age and years. So that was not expected. Obviously, then we look at this consistency, because again, the issue of trust and the rest, but the issue of shutting down the media was not there, because we had a conversation since Friday at night when rumors started indicating, but we had long conversation with the DG, CA, Kiloba, and the rest at that level, and they assured us that there was not going to be any shutdown of the media or internet at all. So that was, but the media obviously was right to be suspicious and raise those issues. But us were comfortable in the sense that we have been assured that there was nothing going to happen in the sense of shutting out the media or internet. So we took his word. I mean, so that was it. But it was timely that the president again reassured people that they were not going to target media for whatever reason. But you also notice that the statements were two, in the sense of we are not going to attack, the media, but at the same time we feel media is biased against us, and this has been consistent, and that's why in one of our discussions we said we also need to sit back and ask ourselves why the consistency is now a year. After election it's nearly 8 months, and this sense of we are media is biased against us, media is unfair, media is, sometimes we need to listen, because like even the president said, sometimes sitting and listening also can help you as a person. So in the sense that yes, media freedom must be defended at all costs, and there's no compromise. But internally, retrospection also becomes important. Why would somebody be raising the same thing for 8 months if there's nothing wrong? So I also believe that as an industry, as professionals, it might help us also to just listen and look at our clips. Yesterday, I was looking at almost all the clips for the coverage, for the 4 days, coverage. Primetime news, and some of the statistics you obviously see that in one item you get maybe a media house giving 25 minutes to 28 minutes, one single item, then the other one is about 10, 12 minutes. So those are indications. They don't mean necessarily unprofessionalism, but they indicate, and the reasons might be different, but we need to relook. I think the major thing which CEA raised, which Media Council has raised, is sometimes how, while there's editorial discretion, and that's purely your professional work in the newsroom, but there are articles in our own code of ethics, like, for example, glorification of violence. It's there in Article 18, I think, or something. Glorification of violence, and at what level do we delve in that? I mean, internally, that at what level do we want to go? So those are questions that have no textbook answer. Some of them, they are made on a decision depending on a newsroom, depending on whether Olive today slept well or not. So sometimes some of those things are not easy. But generally, from what we have seen, other than the attacks against journalists, obviously dramatic events make better news than government statements. And that also is something that people must also start noticing, that even as they talk about media bias, but bias because of what? If there's lack of access to information, like in the 2-3 days of attack, there was no centralized place where government was giving centralized information on the progress on that. So it also becomes difficult for media to know where, in addition to a team that sometimes is more organized in terms of giving out the information. So these are things we have seen. There are things like getting, for example, the signal. These are things that happen, not necessarily because you are biased or you like one media house, but even, for example, during the inauguration of the president, all media houses were using one feed. That doesn't mean that media houses were favoring them. So sometimes even during the Thursday events, it was not that media is biased against the government, but that vehicle, which is purely a press vehicle, was providing a better link for the journalists to get information. So it was not that they were embedded. So these are some of technical issues we saw during elections. Media would get one link from one feed from one place. But these are things some people also don't understand. That's why we talk about media literacy, that people think that somebody just carries a clip and brings to NTV and plays it. I mean, news processes take a lot of time. And many times, sometimes the people, the cameramen, the video colleagues, and other people who are beaten in the field are not the final decision makers. Not all the photos they take or cameras are used. Because we would see, and we have friends, police friends, who are saying that they were targeting media because media was taking their photos when they were beating protesters, which might be used later against them in courts. But not all photos, not all videos that are taken by journalists are necessarily used in the media. So I think that relationship, and we need more dialogue, media security dialogues, so that people understand some of these things, how they operate. It's not easy. It's equally difficult for the journalists in the field. So when police think journalists are enjoying and they should be their target, because what is happening is a political contest. It's not a war between media and journalists, I mean, media and police. We are fighting a war that is not ours. I was seeing a clip of, I mean, we have a number of police officers who are injured, who are in hospitals. Some of them, we visited them yesterday, and you see it. But we are saying, you are fighting a war that is not yours. Now, the politicians have already met in their hotels and taken their tea, while you are now nursing because you are beaten. So we need also to see some excessive. And one more thing is that obviously when the police have already been given in the financial and operational independence, and just in these a few months, this is what they are showing, then we must be very worried that how else is the APOA, the civilian authority working, how police accountability, just like we are talking about journalism accountability, but the police have a bigger responsibility. They are the duty bearers. And many times, not that people hate them, but sometimes people say that's their job to maintain law and order. And sometimes when they get injured in line of duty, I mean, it's not that people enjoy it. But when you start attacking journalists who are not armed, who only have a pen and a paper and a recorder, and you turn all your anger and frustration to them, then you are getting it wrong.
All right, so we need to take a break, but I'll come back and get your sentiments on some of what Victor has said. Victor, the good thing is my sleeping patterns may not influence what we see on the paper or on NTV, because it's a team decision many times. Yes. We sit down as a team and we put our minds together. And
at Nation.
Yeah.
But there are media houses. You know, again, when we talk about media, we only talk about the big six, which have structures and editors and editorial conferences. But we have 200 radio stations in this country where the one person is the editor, is the chief in order, is everything, is a producer, controller, and he's the owner. So
okay. And then the other issue is equal coverage. I mean, we don't sit down and say, okay, we have given Azimio 6 pages, so let us also give Kenya Kwanza 6 pages. I mean, it's the newsworthiness, the weight, of which is the point you are trying to make, the weight of the stories we carry, and that's what we consider when we consider prominence and all that. So we'll continue this conversation on the other side. Stay with us.
342722 or text Cascadia to 22365.
All right, welcome to AM Live. We are discussing press freedom, and this is the title of our conversation, In the Crosshairs, Freedom and Responsibilities of the Press. With me in studio, we have Winnie Kamal, President, Association of Freelance Journalists and Editor, Talk Africa. We have Sami Muraya, Project Manager, Journalists for Human Rights, and Victor Bwire, who we heard from last, Director, Media Training and Development, Media Council of Kenya. And you mentioned Signal. And the headline on the Daily Nation yesterday was this: police in plot to cover up deaths. Signal: the police will no longer release information on deaths, injuries and damage to property arising from the ongoing anti-government protests by opposition supporters. This follows an order sent out by police headquarters to all regional commanders. There is a quote here of the order from Vigilance House. It is advisable for you not to mention officers' names after a serious encounter with not only riotous crowds but also criminals, lest it be used against us. Don't use open files. Let's have restricted access to confidential information via email. Does this go against the right to information, Sami?
No, it doesn't. I would say it doesn't, because at the end of the day, there is also that bit of right to privacy. And I know that Victor earlier on alluded to the code of ethics or the code of practice for journalism in Kenya, and that really does come out very, very strongly. It's the same way. We will always complain, and I liked what Victor said earlier about the police attacking journalists, attacking members of the public. But then how often do we as the media at times cover when the police get hurt, because they do get hurt in the midst of these melee that we have been seeing. And he said that there are so many who are in hospital at the moment that they went and visited. But then I would ask, how many of us covered that? How many of us have gone to the cops and asked them, okay, you got injured during this protest. What is your feeling about it? Because at the end of the day, they also have a voice. They also, as much as we want to see them as the villains, they are people's sons, brothers and sisters, mothers and nieces and all that. They belong to a family setup. They have loved ones who literally rely on them, or who literally look up to them, and who see them as very important people within the society. So when we talk about full coverage, we also need to look at that side of things. That said, though, I still have a problem, because part of the reason why members of the public have been attacking journalists, because we can talk a lot about the police attacking the media, but we've also seen attacks by members of the public who are part of the protests. And the reason for these was a statement by IG Koome saying that they were going to use photos that they collected to basically bring people who are damaging a property to book. And it is within their rights to be able to go for people who make peaceful protests, places where they go and damage property or where they go and steal. But at the same time, once you talk about using photos, using videos, you're already pointing fingers at one direction. The only people who at that particular point are doing that are members of the media. And so I think that particular statement was not a very good one, and it led to some of us being attacked. And we've seen, in fact, from Monday last week, we saw a lot of attacks on the media, and it was on the basis of that particular statement itself.
Okay. And there's something you said, and please allow me to be in my feelings for this one. You talked about these police officers have families and loved ones. So do media. So do I, so do you. So does Eric Kisinta, who has a very young family, who was hit by 3 tear gas canisters. His photo was the one, him and the KTN journalist, we saw the pictures repeatedly aired to show the gravity of the situation. And yet, until Sydney Chazima, who is the reporter we sent to State House yesterday, pressed the president on the question of brute force against the media. It was not going to be a part of his statement. It was not a part of his written statement. This loud silence, even from, and he acknowledged that 3 people have been killed, he said, including 1 police officer. There was no mention of, we do not condone an assault on the press. We have not heard from the Ministry of Interior on this subject, despite the media. And Victor gave us some statistics of how many hours we have dedicated to this subject, right? To the mandamanos in general. But this is something that, as the media, we have taken up and we have raised concern. And yet there has been no statement from the Ministry of Interior. The National Police Service, the day after the events that transpired on Thursday, on Friday, issued a statement, mentioned the police officer, no mention of the press who were reportedly targeted, which was evidenced by those images we saw. No mention, apart from the police, even from the ODPP, calling for investigations. This loud silence, Winnie, what does it say to you?
First, let me oppose what he said, that he agrees with the statement by IG.
I said I disagree.
Oh, no, you
the signal one.
In terms of access to information.
Oh.
That one I totally disagree, because once you block that, then they will come and block others and others. It's just a piecemeal after piecemeal, and then we're just back to the dark days. We need to. I know there's information about confidentiality information. Yes, we can hide some of maybe the numbers, the tags, but the police identification numbers, but we need to know what is happening. Give us information. I like even the OB that is there right now, the digital OB. People go in, and the police at times they send us some of those OBs, and you can see the nitty-gritties of every information that was given, and that is what we need. Access to information is a right for every Kenyan and every citizen. So them saying that they are going to stop, that is not right. And it's not acceptable. I know Victor will say it will be of another view.
I see him reflecting.
But I'm just saying the police standing orders, because that statement the Kome released is just an excerpt from the police standing orders, a document that is already official. So sometimes it's not, the police standing orders there's a whole section on access to information. But obviously, even if we read our...
we always put it under national security. We'll always hide it under national security.
No. Even the Access to Information Act, if we read even, it has limitations. And where, for example, operational information is concerned, where the families, for example, an officer has been lost his life, and the family has not been contacted in the next of kin, you know, they also have their own internal procedure. That does not say that they should not give information, but even under the Joburg principles, Twane principles on the nexus between national security and freedom of expression, it allows that where operational information, like the police cannot tell you how many guns they have, bullets they have, that's purely operational information. And I think I read that thing and I just saw they picked an excerpt from their police force standing orders, which gives which information do you give, which information don't you give, as a purely an operation. They were just reinforcing something. But again, given that now we have an access to information law, maybe an interaction, and that's why lawmaking never stops, an interaction with that force standing orders, and infusing in some of the new thinking now, given that Kenya is a signatory to the open governance system. Kenya is now, accountability partnership. But as it is today, and that's why many times we ask ourselves that while we spend so much time around Article 34 and 35, which relates to media freedom and access to information, but there are so many other media-related provisions in other laws, nearly 30 laws that have. if you read the Money Laundering Act, for example, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act of 2012, it has a whole section on media-related things. So some of these laws, when they come through the media-related law, like the police, you remember the Miscellaneous Amendment of 2014, they move them to others. So if you read the National State Intelligence Act of 2012, Prevention of Money Laundering Act of 2012, and most of these laws are 2012, I don't know why. Prevention of Terrorism Act, read Prevention of Terrorism Act, Article 30 to 30 something. It's a whole chapter on media related, yet it's not a media law, I mean, as it is. So we need to, as a sector, as people, to also start interacting, to have trackers, that any law being made in this country, we must check if it has any provision on media-related or freedom of expression things, because a number of things are hidden under some laws that do not relate. So you remember in that audit we did, we got nearly 21 laws that have provisions on media-related things. Yet we only talk about Article 34, 35. Yet there are other laws, weird laws actually, even our penal code. Our penal code read like section 60, I think, 61. They still have weird provisions, publication of false news, publication of news on foreign dignitaries. Yeah, I mean, weird things, but they are still there. So we need to still continue engaging and getting. Look at the Books and Newspaper Act, 1952 law, but it's still there, though it's never reinforced. But one day, somebody will pick it out and utilize it, yet we rarely mention it. So, and it has weird provision. You are supposed to take a newspaper by 3 in the morning to the Attorney General Register of Newspapers to check and stamp it before you come to mass production. You must give a bond of 10 million. It's still in our law, though it's not practiced today. But those are some of the things that people are saying, that we must prioritize some of these laws. They are not used. So why are we still retaining them in our statutes? Penal code has about 12 sections. So we need to re-engage, and that's why media engagement, especially around laws, must continue happening. There are now people moving around with what is called the Table of Mountain campaign, decriminalization of press freedom related. Why should we continue having, and remember the courts declared that defamation thing, but it's still there. So how do we move? In countries like Ghana, press freedom is not a criminal offense. If you write an article about me which is wrong, I go to court, we sort out with you. Why should the government be involved in it and spend so much money? So those are things that we need to engage. But more importantly, like my colleagues raised, is the issue of impunity. That even, I mean, we wrote a letter, I know we released a letter to DPP, to police inspector, calling for specific investigation around these matters. We released a letter on Friday to them asking that some of these things happen so openly. We have even copied IPOA. We met the IPOA colleagues on Friday, gave them names and some of those details about officers who attacked journalists, including IPOA. So we want to see what would happen out of that. They have promised that they would follow it up. But we have had those promises for quite some time. In this country, we have only had 3 prosecutions, successful and complete, where people who have targeted journalists have been arrested, investigated, and judgments made. And that just, there are just 3 cases. Actually, now there are 4. Obviously, you remember the Makori case, which took years for government even to compensate him. There is the Gachete case, the guy who was injured, our colleague who was injured in Buruburu by a special branch that time. Then there is a case of, I know there's a case in Busia, where a team associated with the former governor attacked some journalists in Busia. That was a case. Then there's now a case in Siaya, where again an OCS attacked journalists. Those are the 4 cases that have gone through a successful process and complete. Yet we record nearly 200 cases nearly every year. And many of these cases have OB numbers, are open. Like I remember the one in Nakuru where a politician opened fire with a pistol on journalists, and it's there. So sometimes you wonder also how, while sometimes they say journalists never follow up, but I think we must have 1 or 2. I see every year the UNESCO Director General from writes to Kenya every year asking specific cases. You remember the 2009 case of Nyaruri in Kisii, Kitui in Eldoret, and many other. And sometimes when you tell people have lost, journalists have lost their lives in Kenya, people think you are creating stories. But we have Nyaruri, we have Kitui, we have Wesonga in Mombasa who died, we have you remember Masha who died. We have 4 journalists, 5 journalists who have died in this country under mysterious circumstances, and it has never been completed. So in a country like Kenya, where it's not even at that high level conflict, and when we have 4 journalists or 5 who have lost their lives, and it can never be traced how they, it's raising. If it was countries elsewhere, Mexico, then somebody would understand. But it's such a country, and where in many cases evidence is there directly, the cameras are there showing. We have a case in Baringo. You know, these are cases where somebody has now kept a journalist's camera for a year or 2, and it's just being held. And this journalist gets their living through that camera. Most of these cameras, unless Nation and maybe Royal Media and a few, many of our journalists buy their equipment. Most of them are correspondents or freelancers. So when you hold their camera for a year, and camera equipment is very expensive, then you have principally killed somebody's life. So Dixon Nabiswa in Kisumu lost his camera. That was maybe a personal camera. A video camera cheapest right now, a quality video camera is nearly 700,000 Kenya shillings. And somebody, that's all his investment. So once you break it for no reason, then that's why colleagues were calling for the issue of insurance of equipment of journalists, insurance, because we have seen these things happen in this country. We are talking about now that area of where the national operation is going on in the parts of North Rift. I was there last week with colleagues there, and the journalists tell you what they are going through there. You cry, principally. It's not easy. I know 2 journalists, female journalists, who have quit journalism in Baringo and another area. Simply, somebody was crying, the job he loved, the job he trained for, but he has to leave because life has just become unbearable. Yesterday in Kakamega, during the loss of where an MCA was killed, a journalist with Sema Radio he slept in the bush today because he had recorded the event when they were exchanging those before the MCA died. So the suspects are now targeting the journalists who recorded the event. So the guy had to sleep in the bush last night. We are trying to see how to get and help them. And the only thing the guy did wrong is to record an event, a public event, and publish, which is their work. So why would they become victims of the work? So people are making the practice of journalism in a country like Kenya, which talks about peace all the time. If it was in a volatile country, somebody would then want to imagine. But in a country where it talks about rule of law, constitutionalism, protection of human rights, private property. But what is happening is people are being attacked because a journalist's camera is their private property. So when somebody confiscates it and keeps it in a police station for a whole year, then what message are you giving? You know, and those are the kind of, and this issue of public profiling people. I mean, you come here in the morning and you are sent to an assignment. So when somebody is telling you about your name and about your tribe, then it doesn't make it, you know, because journalism is not for a particular tribe. It's for all Kenyans who have qualified. And the last but not least is we are looking at a government that wants to create jobs, but that looks at media as a very small place where it's just press conferences. Media in Kenya is a 9 billion industry. 9 billion industry. So that's a huge industry that offers jobs, and some of the media houses here are owned by foreigners. And we are looking for foreign direct investments. And when they open and we close or club their staff and make it. So look at the cost of now doing business in media has become, there's no even insurance that wants to insure media businesses. And that, what does that mean for them? You are killing a whole industry. So let's our colleagues also look at the media industry as a business, an industry that's creating jobs for people, in addition to the human rights issues. But this is where people get their living. So if you are closing it and saying you are creating jobs for youth, yet youth are the same people who are looking for jobs in the media, and you are making it so hostile. Nowadays you ask anybody, I tell you, I can't go to media. Much as I like it, I would rather, simply because we have made media a very hostile place to work, which should not be the case. So we want for people to relook. In Rwanda, every year actually, they hold what is called a national media dialogue every November, where the president opens and all people attend, industry players, just to restate the importance of media as an industry in the contribution of that economy. So I think we need to start also rethinking and looking at media as a major contributor to a GDP, to a major place where people get jobs, and so that we don't limit ourselves into looking. Kenya has now 225 radio stations, 135 TV stations. I mean, nearly 100 publications. So again, media is not just the big 6. that if you have a problem with one media owner, then you extend your war and everybody to everybody. And so deal your political wars outside the media and leave just the media work. Because you target somebody in NTV today, tomorrow, God will, you will be in BBC, you will be in NTV, you will be in his Royal. People move. I mean, you are not a shareholder in Nation. We are just purely a professional employer, and you can move. So people should not use their differences with whoever wants to settle their scores through you as a journalist. You are so innocent.
Okay. Sami, why is it that I know that people say journalists should have no friends, right? In a professional capacity, you get my meaning, right? To avoid being compromised. And we're used to the vitriol that we see online, and Victor has mentioned it. We are used to being dubbed Githeri media. But why have we been, as a profession, been dehumanized? Because journalists, when our soldiers are killed in the front line, we mourn them as a nation. When journalists are injured in the front line because they risk their lives, Eric Kisinta risked his eye. One of the tear gas canisters hit him straight in the face. The other burnt his chest, and he also has burns on his hand. And that is how he makes his living. Why is he not seen as the hustler that this administration celebrates? Because they tell us we are all about the hustler. Why is Eric Kisinta not seen in that line of a man with a family he's trying to provide for, but as a vulture, because they view journalists as vultures who feed on carcasses?
Well, I'll start by correcting something. The reason why I spoke about the police directly didn't mean that I don't really care about the media, because I'm a journalist myself, and I do care about Eric and the fact that he has a family as well. But then when you are to look at the two, Eric got a lot of coverage. Eric's issue was covered. We spoke about it as an industry, and that's why I was saying, while we will speak about our colleagues very passionately, do we do the same for the police? That was my question at that particular point, not really castigating the journalists that were
Oh, no,
attacked.
no, I'm not accusing you of
that.
that.
No.
Okay.
I just needed to clarify that point. However, in terms of us being dehumanized, during the elections, or just before the elections and during the campaign period, we had a lot of trainings that were happening by different stakeholders across the country. And one of the key questions that kept popping up was, is it right to embed a journalist within a political party? Because that happens a lot, where you will notice that, say, for example, Olive Barrows knows people in Kenya Kwanza. So we are going to have Olive Barrows always doing stories for Kenya Kwanza. Does it mean Olive supports Kenya Kwanza? Maybe not. Probably not in most instances. But then the assumption at that particular point will be that the fact that this person always reports stories about this political party, then that is the party that they are sympathetic to. And the same thing would apply to Winnie going to Azimio on the other side. And there's always been that argument of this person probably understands the issues within that camp very well, has been covering them for a while. There's trust between that journalist and that particular political party, and hence the reasoning behind having that person there. But then now we were also telling them, I think it's important for us to shuffle people around. So that when I mentioned, and I know Victor spoke about names, the reason why those names pop up, and I'll use an example of our colleague Stephen Leto. When the president was actually when he was receiving his certificate in Bomas, he picked out Stephen Leto, and his only crime, Leto's crime at that particular point, was that he was doing a lot of stories on the Azimio side of the divide. So I think that is something else that we need to look at as editors and ask ourselves, is this the right thing? Are we doing the right thing, having certain journalists that cover certain political parties? Because then that is where that enmity begins. That is where the issues start with us being targeted, because then I will always be seen as a so-and-so individual who covers this political party. Then there's the whole issue about bias. And again, we keep on asking ourselves, we say we are a democracy, but then how democratic, mature, how democratically mature are we as a nation? And democratically mature, why am I asking that question? Because in other countries, you'll see media houses that will take a stand and say we are supporting these political party. A case in point would be in the US, where Fox News, for example, has always been seen to be very friendly to the Republicans. But then what we also saw from the former president was he always attacked CNN. Why? Because CNN were not singing to his tune. And any issue that was there in the American government at that particular point, it is CNN and others who are bringing those issues out. And so it is not alien for a media house to literally decide to support a political party. It is just about the growth of a democracy and how mature people are, because it doesn't necessarily mean just because this media house supports political party A or political party B, then they should be attacked.
Okay. All right. I just want to look at a bit more of the statement from the Kenya Media Sector Working Group. And they say while safety of journalists should be guaranteed, the Kenya Media Sector Working Group notes with alarm the increasing number of journalists targeted by law enforcement officers. Since the demonstrations by the Azimio la Umoja coalition began on March the 20th, we have documented more than 20 cases of attacks and violations against journalists, including harassment, arbitrary arrests, and physical attacks, with state actors responsible for or encouraging a significant portion of these attacks. And I'm curious whether you agree with that statement, that state actors are responsible for encouraging a significant portion of these attacks. We take great exception to the profiling of the media and blunt threats by the Deputy President, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, and the Inspector General of Police. Such sentiments coming from the officers with the prime responsibility of protecting the media are shocking and unfortunate. And we call upon all actors in Kenya to stop profiling and attacking journalists, as it is an attack on democracy. We demand that the Director of Public Prosecutions, the IG, the and IPOA to ensure accountability for all threats and violence against journalists through impartial, prompt, thorough, and independent and effective investigations. And we demand that the ODPP addresses the nation to give an update on the status of investigations and plan for prosecution of the attackers. In this regard, we hereby issue to the DPP and investigations and to the DPP a 7-day ultimatum to deliver a statement on the status of the investigations and prosecution of those culpable. And we call upon IPOA to update the nation on the status of investigation on police brutality against journalists. And the Article 34 that you referenced has been referenced here. I'll skip that one. But they say we also demand that the government commits to compensating journalists already harmed, including paying for their medical treatment and replacing damaged or lost equipment, failure to which media houses should consider blacking out government events. Would that be a wise course of action? Victor will discuss that with you. On live coverage, our policy position is that every media house, while entitled to do live coverage, needs to have the proper equipment, and I'm sure Winnie has a lot to say on this one, and deploy the proper technology that can allow delayed relay of the feed of the live coverage that may be used for purposes of incitement or vilification of others. Broadcasters are encouraged to conduct proper risk assessment and to deploy equipped personnel and technology that can ensure coverage that adheres to the highest journalistic standards and ethics. And media houses must prioritize safety and welfare of journalists covering conflict situations. Did that happen in this instance, especially on Thursday? And we demand, because we are demanding accountability from the authorities, are we also demanding accountability from the media owners? And we demand clear safety and protection protocols before they deploy journalists to cover situations that are potentially violent. Journalists deployed must be properly insured against such risks and must be provided with proper personal protective equipment. And they continue. So I'm going to leave this statement there, and you can see that it has been signed by how many organizations are these? 17. Organizations: Kenya Editors Guild, Kenya Union of Journalists, Article 19, Eastern Africa, Kenya Correspondents Association, Internews, Association of Media Women in Kenya, Political Journalists Association of Kenya, Digital Publishers Association of Kenya, Kenya Parliamentary Journalists Association, Digital. There are so many associations, ni nyingi, but they've zimefika 17. Winnie,
yes.
Do those who deploy their journalists to these situations also bear responsibility for their safety?
Yes, we as editors, we bear the responsibility when we need to even assess the risk that even as you're sending out your colleague, because this is your colleague, even though they are maybe your juniors also. These are your colleagues. So we need to assess the risk that they are going to. And they need to be well protected. And also we are asking for insurance. I know I speak from the freelance journalist, and that is something that we were trying to work out. And we're saying that even for the freelance journalist, there's a way we are trying to look at fundraising and seeing if we can get partners who can help us for freelancers so that we can be able to protect ourselves. I know the duty, the responsibility lies with us. And also as an individual, before going out, make sure you also assess the risk. And I know right now it was really tricky because when you go behind the police are against you. When you go with the goons will attack you. So you're in a catch-22 situation and you don't know where to go to and which place to lean to. But if you're well protected and you can be given the equipment, yes, but you don't know how to use it. You don't know how to lock up the helmet, make sure the body armor is good and everything. Those are some of the things. And people would say, it's very heavy. But you need to protect yourself. And also another thing we came to know is that even as journalists are being attacked, we are not reporting. We're not going to the police and reporting. And no action can be done by any party if there's no reporting we do not have an OB number. So then it becomes difficult for us to be able to prosecute these cases. So we're asking journalists, or at an individual level, let's protect ourselves. First, we assess the risk where we're being sent. Make sure if you're alone, because I know at times you might be alone, but when you go to the field, you become many because you're different media houses. Work as a group. Don't go alone. You want to scoop, you want to get a story alone. No, work as a team. Work as a group. And also make sure at least your company, the company that is taking you there, they should at least have insurance for you. So that if anything happens, then we know there's a mechanism that we can be able, that's what we're coming up with as the Kenya Media Sector Working Group. A mechanism that the protocol of reporting where we can be able to deploy even ambulances to the journalists who've been affected. And these are journalists with families. We're not talking about people who are just there. These are journalists who come from families. So we make sure we protect ourselves, we make sure we report the cases, and we have even a network of lawyers that can help us. So we have all these protocols that we put in place, but also individual responsibilities. That's with us as journalists, that we are able to know where we're going and just being careful. Like one of the ambassadors said from the US said, there's no story worth your life. Yes, in as much as there's adrenaline rush and you want to go and tell the story, you want to do this thing, don't put yourself in harm's way. Just look at things and assess everything and you'll be able to be safe. Yes.
Okay. And Victor, I remember before the elections, we did some training with you, and you told us if you find yourself in a stampede situation, you know, this is the position you take. But, you know, many of us don't anticipate. Ideally, in situations like Maandamano, we expect that we can go and hide behind, we can go take our pictures and then run and hide behind the police. You don't anticipate that the person who is targeting you are the police. Did we do enough, or how have we done enough as media to properly equip and train our personnel for situations such as this?
Thanks. The training was done, and the training I did for with you NTV standard training that is done globally. I'm a member of the Global Safety of Journalists Network, where I'm a partner, and this happens all through in Liberia and Somalia. That's the standard practice, because we are not training journalists to become warlords themselves. It's purely self-protection. So rather than, one of the things that you notice is the transition in newsrooms is too high, that the people you trained in August last year might not still be in the newsroom. People move on. So we keep on getting new staff, new colleagues, others who, so training becomes continuous. You cannot say we trained last year, so we can't train this year, because that transition. The bigger thing also is now going forward, how frequent are we doing some of these trainings? Because some of these trainings just need 30 minutes refresher, because we are not training you to become, like I mentioned, but we need to. I can tell you, I was talking to Nabiswa, the Citizen TV colleague who got injured in Kisumu. And actually, Nabiswa was running away. I mean, he was not targeted, but while running, he fell down by mistake. So a lot of the injuries he got was people running, who are running over him. And that training, obviously, I've had David Murunga and Nakuru, who some of those trainings have helped a lot of people, I can tell. You know our colleagues in the CNN, Reuters, and they are even accompanied by a security person when they're going to the field from a distance, just to help those small reminders. The biggest thing we're also seeing, like in the Mandamanos, yes, it was purely targeted attacks against journalists. Yes. So that even, you remember the NTV guy had protective gear. It's not that he didn't have. But when you are now become a target where police officers are targeting, because a rubber bullet, a canister tear gas can kill, and it has killed many people. It's not the first time. Mwangozi in Tanzania was killed by a tear gas. So that force, if somebody is targeting you, even if you had a protective gear, it can kill you. You might, in addition to the physical injury, you have blood pressure. You are a human being. So the targeting of journalists becomes wrong, whether they have equipped or not. Yeah. But more importantly, it becomes important. The big six, I know, they have those arrangements to have NTV, Royal Media, KTN. They have those protective gear, and most of the international media have. But we need to do more, because those protective are only in Nairobi. And that's why this week, we are talking about the absence of media owners in these discussions. Because you will speak, you will do all these things, but who makes the decision? That they also need, it would have been happy to see a statement from the Media Owners Association about their employers, because the people we are talking about is their employers. Even if they're engaging with government behind the scenes, but that public show that I have been injured and my employer came out on behalf of me, it makes a lot of sense. So we need to see more of that. We need to invest more, not just in protective equipment, which is a must. In fact, again, moving away from the law, we speak as if media journalists are not protected by the right to life, right to a job, right? Under the labor laws, any company is supposed to provide for its staff protective gear. Journalists are employees, so under the labor rights, if we were to do an audit, do media houses meet those requirements under occupational health, under labor rights? They don't do. And why would you want to risk your staff at that? I know the senior most in the media houses. You will see CEOs, chairmen of these companies, their cars and themselves, they are insured. But the biggest people who they depend on, the correspondents, are not insured. So we also have an industry that thinks in the reverse. That's right. So we need to see that more. But more also, we need to invest in equipment that goes with modern times. Seeing a journalist today in this age with a better camera struggling on the streets also just says that companies, no, there are now smaller cameras, smaller portable, manageable cameras that journalists can use in such demonstration without exposing it. Because, in fact, when we are looking at the statistics of the 20 or so cases we are mentioning, nearly cameramen and the photographers are the biggest number who have been injured. Yeah. That tells you the equipment they carry to the field also exposes them so much. In fact, one of the cases that we are following up in Kipra is the people are not attacking journalists because of their journalists. They are looking at if they stole that camera, how much they will sell that camera. So it's purely the equipment they are targeting to steal and go and sell. So again, broadcasters must start also investing in technology that allows their journalists to minimize risks around themselves because of the equipment they're carrying. Some of the vehicles are branded, and the branding of the vehicle sometimes also exposes journalists. The branding of the mics sometimes also exposes. So these are constant. It's not a textbook thing. It's a constant thing that we must be reviewing. If, for example, NTV has been singled out by a particular party for whatever reason or government, then if we are sending there our staff, it might just be safe to remove the brand. On the mic. These are purely survival tactics, so that then we minimize risk and exposure to harm. Because already also, while they are profiling, journalists have also profiled which people in government hate journalists. I mean, and we discuss it more. And a number of those cases, when you are going to cover, we need just to be sure you have a background around this person you are covering, so that sometimes you need just to mentally prepare yourself, the person you are going to deal. But also, and this is something we also need to, because we also get, there are some journalists also who and they don't deserve, but the manner we brand ourselves also as journalists becomes also like the personal branding. Who are you? When you say I'm Olive, how do people rate you? Because we have also received about 4 or 5 cases about journalists who go to the field drunk, in slippers, in tatters, and the picture they give, even if it's poverty, I mean, and the clothes is a problem, but there's a manner you present yourself, even if you are poor, in a way that you also respect is. So we have 4 cases, and for example, the DP has raised particular concerns about a nation media group's journalists, who in many cases goes, I mean, away from, I mean, in addition to now official work, and they get involved in other things. And we also need editors and human resources in media houses to take action against staff who are blatantly corrupt, who are extorting people, and cases are brought, so that we also show other people we are committed. Because if we are talking about accountability and all these things, but when our own staff are reported, or when we are told so-and-so did this, and then we say, sometimes we say media council is sleeping. What has media? So if a staff of Nation Media Group did a mistake and it has been reported, you have your own internal mechanisms of dealing with staff. Why would the media council be the first person to be asked what they have done? We expect that internally the media house will do. By the time the case reaches out external cases, internally you have exhausted. So we also need to call out the journalists who are, we have even talked about the issue of quacks and that, but there are journalists in Israel who have become just purely extortionists. They have no respect to professionalism. They have no respect to their own identity or their own. I worked in Nation here. I mean, and there was a company image. If you are reported to have done or got informed in 1 or 2 things at a Nation, you will be just not because you are poorly performing in your work, but purely of the company image. Is that there anymore? So that we also care about our staff when they go there. What image do they present outside? So there's also some things internally we must also, as a team, start looking and saying, if people have been raising something about Victor 100 times, Nation has reviewed, complaints about you. What are they doing? So that we also show people that if our staff go astray, and we are not a perfect, we are not a group. We are saying we are not a perfect group among ourselves. There are journalists also who do, for whatever reason, who do 1 or 2 things that might not be professional. When we receive that cases, what do we do with them? Do we show that we act on them? This will also show, because if this person has been complained about 4 times and the media house has never done anything, then that's why some of this anger you are seeing from some politicians, because they told us they have reported this person not once, not twice, not thrice, but the company has done nothing. Okay. So it seems that these guys are wrong.
All right, and we'll come back to that, because actually you've preempted one of my questions, which is some of what we are seeing from the political leadership evidence of frustration of the system not working? Because the Media Council, for instance, Kimani Ichung'wah spoke when MPs had a retreat in Mombasa, and he said, we have complained to the Media Council of Kenya. Are they toothless dogs? Victor has explained some of the nitty-gritties of that, but we'll get further into that conversation. And also, Sami, is a blackout as proposed? Will it help or hurt the cause on the other side of this break? Beautiful pictures there. Welcome back to AM Live. In the crosshairs, freedom and responsibilities of the press. Sami, I'll come to you on the question of blackout, but and I know Victor spoke right before, but I want him to answer me this. Some of the posts we have seen, Aaron Cheriot talking about crashing the media, calling them a cartel, Kimani Ichung'wah, you know, joined the bandwagon as well. Like even his performance, should I call it a performance, on on Citizen TV was wanting, right? He was quite hostile when he appeared there. Is it evidence of frustration with the regulator?
I don't think there's any frustration with the regulator, because all cases that have come at the regulator have been dealt with. So, but you are also aware that the regulator is not the only place people come for. I mean, the law allowed those who are not satisfied with the regulator to go to the courts and use other mechanisms other than profiling and beating up journalists or individual capability. But we have had very high profile cases that we have handled, and the Media Council Complaints Commission actually has no pending case as we speak today. And I mean, the former President Uhuru Kenyatta had a case there, Mudavura had a case. I can name CBK Governor Dr. Njuguna, just a case we just finished. And we have never had a problem. So for the reason that people want to doubt, there was a time, obviously, we must admit that media itself never believed in self-regulation. And for quite a long time, media houses never accepted decisions of the Complaints Commission of the Media Council. And that's why that a lot of the decisions that the Media Council had made, the previous board, well, media houses were flouting them. They were not following. So people were asking, if you don't trust in your own system that you brought for self-regulation, then why should we be bringing cases there? But that has changed, especially with the approach, because some of these things are also lessons. Largely now, the Complaints Commission is using the mediation approach, because the initial was purely fines. You are fined because the law provides your name and shame, fine, and mediation it had provided. And at that time, we noticed so much the quasi-judicial approach was not working, because again, cases would take there for years. Lawyers would come and still ask for adjournments and what, and it became another legal process. Yet the Complaints Commission approach was purely sort of a civil, quick manner to solve cases. But when people also now turned them, there are cases that were going there for 6 years, for 7 years, people also started getting that. But the new Complaints Commission, then we looked at the approach, and as I'm reporting to you today, unless a case was reported Friday, there's no pending case. And people have been, I mean, I've seen even Nation just 2 weeks ago, a few weeks ago, running an apology, and others and others. And the only other thing that people get annoyed is that the Media Council Complaints Commission has no monetary compensation. And a lot of our people want money. I won a case against Nation, I want money. But the Complaints Commission and the Media Council, that's not a word. Money that if Olive did something wrong. So that also, then people start getting tired, because you have spent money paying lawyers and what, then there's no monetary compensation. And that's what it was, decriminalize press freedom. And there's no, so that, but to me, that Complaints Commission, because I also walk around a bit, and if you checked, the Media Council itself plus the Complaints Commission is one of the stable institutions in Africa, not just in Africa. And we have done comparative studies with elsewhere. It's one of the most working, even with its own weaknesses, it's one of the most working media regulation using a co-regulation model in the region. I mean, not even the region, globally. And in May, we are getting people from other countries to come and learn how the Media Council, the media regulation generally in Kenya is working. So to us, and comparing with other countries, that system, even with its weaknesses, it just needs more trust and people to understand. We are working with the Complaints Commission for an outreach program for people to know how it works, and the bit of why we decriminalized. If you go through it, there's no monetary compensation, because I see a lot of people who give up, or who they anticipate they will be given some money after winning or losing. But that's not the approach. The approach was purely that we handle, we mediate. Because again, one of the interesting bits about media complaints is that, and that's why we have taken the mediation approach, a number of genuine people who complain about media many times just want to meet the NTV editor and they tell them their mind. I met that editor and I told them their mind. And we get a lot of satisfaction that you wrote a wrong story about me, I met you, I told you. And many people feel satisfied. And that's why we are seeing the mediation approach, where we bring the accuser and the accused together and they talk, and we see a lot of cases being solved in that manner. So you know, in Kenya, again, one of the challenges I've seen is that for you to be seen to have truth, You must be a person who punishes people, who takes people to jail. But that media council, we have never taken that because media is also a young profession that if we took a very extreme position of every day banning journalists, we will not be helping. Remember, the media council is both a regulator and a media development institution. The functions are conjoined. So at the same time, we protect media freedom. At the same time, we're the regulator, which is also a challenge in the law. Because at one institution, you are the regulator, and you are the same institution that protects. Sometimes it also brings some philosophical differences. But I can tell you, the Media Council, as it is, we are not 100%, but it's a functional, working system that if you went to other countries, you will be surprised. So let's invite the DP and others to bring their cases. They will be handled very professionally, and he will be satisfied.
All right. Sami, the question of blackout, because I was talking about statements that have been made by those in leadership positions, and all the way from the presidency to the leadership of parliament. So where do journalists stand? And so the proposal, a proposal contained herein is a possible blackout. Will that help or hurt the cause?
Well, let's look at it twofold. Yeah, because today, if say Olive is working at Nation and Olive is not being paid her salary and it goes on for a period of time, Olive will get to a point where you threaten to quit. And the reason for quitting is not because you don't love the job, it's because there is something that you expect out of this job that you're not receiving. In that particular statement, I think it was very clear. The main reason why we will give these government agencies a blackout is basically for the mere fact that we are seeing journalists being attacked. We're not hearing from the National Police Service. We've not had anything from the ODPP's office. We've not even had, at least yesterday we had something from the executive, and I like what the president said in terms of the importance of having a free media, because it is very, very important to have that free media, though with a caveat about the biasness. But the blackout itself, if you ask me whether it's good or not, it is good at that particular point, because if certain things are not met, then we might as well down our tools. We cannot, you cannot only see us as good people only when you want us to relay your messages. And when we come to you and tell you we need accountability for the attacks on the media, attacks on journalists, you decide you do not want to take any responsibility. But then there's also, and that's why I said we'll look at it twofold, because there's also the responsibility that we, the media, also have to the public. If there is critical information that is coming out from any of these offices, does it mean then we blank it out just because we are pretty angry about what is going on? We have colleagues, and I know Victor can speak to these as well, that have gone for months without salaries, yet they are still working. They are within our industry, and I think those are some of the factors that Victor was talking about earlier when talking about how we as the media also contributes to the image and how people see us. Because what happens is, if you don't pay somebody for 4 months, this person, you're still expecting this person to go to the field every day and ensure that they get their work done. What ends up happening is this person will more likely or not start asking the source of their information to give them some money for fare, to give them some money for something else, so that they can be able to survive. And that in itself also leads to the whole thing of encouragement of brown envelope journalism, which we've had so much about. And every time we talk to people, they'll tell you journalists are always asking us for money. And it's because there is a failed responsibility on the part of us as editors as well as media owners. And you will always hear again the accountability issue of how much the government owes these media houses. So it's a cycle at the end of the day, because when you talk to media houses, they'll tell you there's a lot of money that we are owed, and the biggest debtor is the government. So the same government at the same time is literally saying that we as journalists are not doing our jobs the way it is supposed to be done. And the trickle-down effect of it is because of that money that was not given, it doesn't get to the journalist, and that journalist might, I'm not saying they're always, might go to the source, who's a politician, who's somebody else, and ask for money. And there might be some bias towards that person, because at that particular point, this person is ensuring that I have food on the table.
No. Okay.
Yes.
But Winnie, picking up from Victor and Sami, can we expect others to respect us if we don't respect ourselves? And I don't mean just as even individual journalists, but even as an industry, because some of what they've raised, the question of brown envelope journalism, it's a big issue. But then again, as Sami is saying, to be fair, in many instances, you have correspondents who have to travel distances to cover a story, and then their pay is delayed. And even to get that pay, the person who is sending you the money tells you commission niaje.
Imagine. And the reality on the ground is really sad. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I want to tell the nation that it is unacceptable right now for a journalist who does, you see this photo, this front page photo. I'm seeing this photo. This photo right now goes for 250 shillings. 250 shillings. This is unacceptable. That if I'm going to do a story full page like a center spread, I'm going to be paid 2,000 shillings. That is unacceptable in this day and age. How do you survive with 2,000 shillings? And then you look at, and you've done 1,500 words, and yet you're being paid that. That is unacceptable. How will we have the respect, like some is saying, how will we gain the respect of the people, yet us ourselves, we're not able to take care of ourselves. We're not able to tell people, we're not able to take care of our people. You mentioned very well. You go to the field, the correspondents, the freelancers. I'm talking from the point of view of a freelance and a correspondent journalist. That photo that is given you, before COVID, it used to be 500 shillings. But because of COVID, now it has become a reason. Now it is 250.
This picture?
Yes.
Is 250 shillings?
250. Before COVID, it was 500 shillings.
And somebody has spent the entire day covering this event.
You have gone, you've been tear gassed, you've been done for everything, and then you come back home, you just get 250 shillings if it makes to this front page. Okay, you go back, if you do a feature, a full fledged, like this, if you do a center spread.
What page is that?
If you do a center spread, that is cover to cover, you will get 4,000 shillings in this day and age. And before that, actually it was 4,000, and now, right now it is 2,000. And if they are very generous enough, they will give you at 2,500 shillings. Seriously, what are we telling the public about ourselves? If we don't treat ourselves and love ourselves better, what are we telling the people about ourselves? Will they respect us? And like Sami said, that people haven't been paid. Journalists are crying day and night. Some are getting into mental issues because of just payment. You know, you might think it's just a payment, but it is something that is worth. This is a journalist who is feeding his family, who is paying school fees. There's one journalist right now, he talked to me, and he's a guy. He's a man with 4 kids. And like, hey, Winnie manze, sijalipwa 4 months, na nashindwa naenda wapi. And I can't stay at home, because when I stay at home, the kids will come for you. I mean, you will look like you have nothing. So you just come out, you just walk. And you're walking from Eastlands. You're coming to town. Then along the way, you might find a source who will tell you, manze, thank you for the good work you did. Shika here lunch. At least, if you're given 500 shillings, that day you're like, heaven has opened up. But it's a reality that is really, really sad, and we would like to have, it's this industry only that we do not have minimum wages for journalism. At least we should have that conversation and ask all editors and all media owners, please, entry is this much, 1,500. This picture should be this much. so that if we're able to quantify ourselves and quantify our work, then we will know where we're going. If the new, like Victor always loves saying, we have 200 stations. If those 200 stations do not follow a particular rule, that if you're setting up and you're licensed by CA, the minimum you have to employ your correspondent is this much. The minimum you have to pay for a feature story is this much. Then we should all play by that playbook that we are going to write as an industry. But if you're just there free for all, yes, you go and be licensed by CA, and then you'll add up to the numbers. You become 200 stations, radio stations, but you don't have a minimum caveat for employment, and we're not following the labor laws. Then who are we? We'll be seen as something else.
And that many times, Nation Media Group is a blue chip company, Nairobi Stock Exchange. Why would we want to be told even how to pay your staff and minimum? You know, sometimes this abrogation of responsibilities sometimes shocks me, because the same owners, and I'm using this because I'm in Nation right now, but the same thing is happening, that the owners of Nation have bakeries, have banks, have hospitals, have other things where they pay their staff. Why does it come to the media business where they don't want to pay, for example? Because that's what's happening. Because these people we are talking about in the other media houses who have not been paid, the same owners have businesses in other sectors and they pay their people. Why is it that it's only media they don't want to pay? Is it because of lack of minimum pay? No. It's purely the attitude we are talking about, that do the media owners, the investors, respect journalists? That's the thing. Do they respect them? Because the labor laws are there. They give minimum wages for everybody, including journalists. I mean, so it's not lack of law, but it's purely an attitude. It's purely that people who invest in media do have no respect for this. And we have also played along, because, for example, if we have not been paid for 6 months, why can't we, for example, strike? I'm just asking, must we continue? Because I know those companies that are owning staff for 6 months for are doing other things. Some of them are paid money, they will lie, it's GA that owes them, which is not a lie. Or even when GA pays them, they sponsor golf tournaments instead of paying their staff. These things are happening in this country. So at what level? People must also show some prioritization. Who do we prioritize? We are told globally, your biggest asset in a business is your human resource. It's the staff you have. It's not about the vehicles, it's not about the tournaments, it's the people you have. But if to you, as a manager, as a station, or a CEO of a company, your staff salaries and their SACCO contributions and all that is not a priority, then you also need to be somewhere else, because we are seeing the same people, what they are doing, the opulence they are showing. And where is it? In some of these places, it's purely EPL. That one person is paid 1.2 million salary, and in the same media house, people are going for 6 months without a pay, the same place. So some of these things also are purely moral, that if I'm a manager, I'm an editor, for example, I'm a station man, because I see salaries delay even where I work. But when our salaries delay, we can say the CEO can stay without a salary for 2 months, but our other colleagues must be paid. But here is where the people at the top pay themselves. They will enjoy whatever, even if the company is going through challenges, but their staff, cadre, are not. So is it purely lack of money, prioritization? So we must also engage in a way where Eric was telling me the other day, SG, talking about the attitude even of the human resource teams. Why, even if you are going to sack somebody, and people are sacked every day, it's not just in the media, why would you send somebody an SMS at 1 that you have been sacked? Why what was burning? What was so urgent that you have to sack somebody to an SMS at 1 in the morning? You remember even the other time, a colleague was sacked on the plane coming for an official assignment of the company. What was so urgent? What is so dehumanizing that if you wanted to sack somebody, and you have every right because you are an employer, there are procedures for laying off people. But we dramatize, we dehumanize people to a level where, and why? And in some of these conversations, the CEOs, the HR departments, man, they're involved in some of these guys, because they are really, really mishandling, dehumanizing colleagues, that sometimes people, this mental issue you are raising, it's not because you have lost jobs, because people lose jobs every day, but the manner you are treated, the manner you are laid off, that is so dehumanizing. You are sent an SMS to sack me. So then, what was happening between morning, I'll just come here and you tell me, we have given me a notice of you'll be leaving, and I leave. I mean, it's not that I was born here, I die here. In any case, one day I leave. So why we, and many times, sometimes, it's our fellow journalists who are now senior editors and who participate in some of these things, that you literally chase your colleagues out. And then tomorrow you are in the same class, in the same school, then tomorrow it will be a day, and then we meet in the street. So why were you dramatizing it? So to me, I believe there's a time we had started an indexing of voting media houses, the best in terms of, we were called media what? We wanted to rate media houses in terms. So we came up with a tool of media house in terms of performance, but we asked ourselves, and we discussed the idea, because we asked, how would you say this media house is the best in terms of performance? The same media house is doing very well in news, everything, but it doesn't pay its staff. Human rights are violated. So how do you rate such a media house? Say, and there's a global human rights compact, which some of these media houses are, because of their companies, belong. But they don't measure anything, because the human rights violation in media houses is appalling. And that's why sometimes people also ask, we talk about human rights of others, we write all, but what is the human rights respect in our newsrooms? So that's why I would say that we must also start rethinking about, we moved away from human management, we still have human resources, humans do what managers. People have moved, we're now talking about human relations. We no longer talk about human. In many of our companies now we have human relations managers, not human resources. Because it's not about human relations. How do you relate? How do you relate? When an employer is tapped on the back of having done well, sometimes not just the money. People feel so honored you did it. But in media houses, you will always hear when people have done, when they do good things, fantastic story, nobody ever says, this one you did well. But you're always reminded when you have made a mistake. And you're a human being. So why the obsession with negativity, with chasing away colleagues, every day threatening, we'll sack 300, we'll sack 200. You know, there's nothing positive coming. And you dehumanize people. So we need also those in the management and the HR to start appreciating the fact that journalists are human beings who went to school, who look for this job, who will work here and go elsewhere and work. And it's not like when you sack them here, it's their end of life. Just professionalize the way people exit newsrooms. Just let's be friendly. And when somebody's time has reached, if it's performance or whatever reason, let them live as human beings. And that will bring the, because these very things you bring, they come because of the way we treat ourselves, and we don't love ourselves, we hate ourselves, and then now people start seeing some of these tabias coming from ourselves. And now the worst that is happening is our colleagues who have joined, who are working for politicians. The directors of communication in the counties, the media relations managers with the ministers and the CSS are the same people who say, they go and start also profiling their colleagues to the politician. And some of these headlines, positions being taken by politicians, are purely informed by journalists who have joined, who are working for them.
Because I wanted to ask this government, David Mugonyi, former journalist, Hapa Nation, Hussein Mohammed, Royal Media Services, Francis Gashudu, although he joined the Ministry of Interior. I mean, this government is chock full of former communicators, and yet we are seeing these threats to press freedom.
Journalists, former
chock full of former journalists.
The brief they give to their bosses is very weird. And it informs part of, some of them are very difficult, obviously, but a lot. Because I've also worked elsewhere one day when I was not inactive. And the brief we tell them is, we are a nation, we are a citizen, and we are saying, this guy was calling to look for a story. He was not looking for money. But the quick assumption is, once a journalist is calling, it's the money they want. So we also dehumanize our colleagues who work elsewhere, and that's the perception. Because I worked there, and one day I said, you know, I can't be dehumanized by people I've gone to school more than. I have 4 degrees from big universities, 3 from University of Nairobi, 1 from Makerere. Then I'm being dehumanized by a PA to a politician or a driver simply because I'm a journalist. And he what your media? And I ask you, man, what your media wamefanya nini? Media ni watu wameenda shughuli hata wanakushinda. So, you know, that respect must also be the people that who get the opportunity to work around. That yes, journalists might have mistakes, which they do, they're human beings. But it cannot be that level where you profile and inform your bosses to have this very, I can tell you the extreme positions, the harassing and the profile is informed by our own colleagues who give these briefs about others when they are there.
Okay. All right, Anu, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Na Victor apewe chai kwa bili yangu. We've had in studio, we've had Victor Bwire, Director, Media, Training and Development, Media Council of Kenya, Sami Murera, Project Manager, Journalist for Human Rights, and Winnie Kamau, President, Association of Freelance Journalists, and an editor at Talk Africa. AM Live continues on the other side of this break.